And I drove towards the radio station, and there saw Julian Clegg walking nonchalantly through the storm. He was walking down from his home in Kemp Town, thinking that perhaps he ought to pop in and see what was going on. I gave him a lift in the last few hundred yards, and we went into the radio station to there find a policeman and 3 members of the public huddled in reception. They'd decided that this was the safest place to be. Slowly, those that could, those members of staff and contributors who could, managed to get into the radio station, and we went on air, and we stayed on air, I can't remember now, continuously, giving coverage, giving reassurance, taking reports, and indeed becoming for some time just about the only working communications medium in the whole of the county.
This is BBC Sussex at 30. So, who are the longest-serving members of the BBC Sussex team? Sarah Marks is the woman with the friendly smile who greets you on arrival in our current headquarters in Brighton.
I started at the radio station 28 years ago in the spring of 1985 as what was then a radio production assistant. I initially joined from the BBC in London on a 6-month attachment, and I've been here ever since. I think the only person who's been here longer than me is our gentleman of sport, John Lees. My role used to involve helping out on the morning programmes. I'd set up the guests for Julian Clegg's show and make up some of the questions for his various quizzes, like What's the Year and Hit the Headlines. After that, I worked on the current affairs programme, Sussex Scene, which used to go out between 11 and 1. Probably my happiest time here, helping out on our annual two-wheel appeal, which used to happen one Sunday before Christmas every year, and bikers from all over Sussex would come into our Brighton reception, and as listeners called in with pledges, the bikers would go off and collect the money for charity. They'd then bring it back, and we'd bank it the next day to help worthy causes in time for Christmas.
I want you to listen to this letter, because people say to me, what does this appeal mean to people and where does the money go? And here's a couple who wrote to us from last year's appeal on Radio Sussex, and they say, Dear friends of the radio, my husband and I would like to thank you for the parcel of groceries given to us by way of your two-wheel appeal and passed on to us through Age Concern. Such a lovely surprise. Things were so bad this year, we weren't sure whether we would be able to afford anything extra for Christmas this year, so the things you provided for us really were very special indeed. Yours sincere. I'm not going to mention the name, but I have the letter here, and that's the sort of thing that we're doing this morning, isn't it, Nick and Stuart? You'd agree with that?
We'd agree.
Yeah.
It is. Yeah, it makes it. It does put it in perspective. So,
yeah. And I think the other thing is that we won't take credit cards today, so no credit card appeal. This is cash and cheques only, and the money is spent this week, which I think is fairly unique in an appeal, in that the money we raised today will be going out tomorrow and Tuesday. Stuart, you've got something there?
I've got a note here that we've got £10 pledged, but we can get it doubled if we play a Christmas record. That's not bad, is it?
Oh, right. Well, what have we got here?
If you'd like to support the two-wheel appeal, call BBC Radio Sussex now on 0273 570057. And thank you for making someone's Christmas that much better.
But in the middle of all the fun and frivolity, we've also tackled some very serious subjects and won awards in the process. Former presenter Philippa Dolly for her series, and in 1990 another former host, Miranda Birch, was awarded Medical Journalist of the Year for her investigation into the grim realities of AIDS.
I'm Miranda Birch, and between now and 10 we'll be looking at what an HIV antibody test actually means and how people who are HIV positive come to terms with their condition.
My own doctor came round to see me, which he wasn't in the habit of doing, and just said that he thought I should know that the test was positive. That was 3.5 years ago now. I felt as if a sort of sheet of glass had come down in front of me and the rest of the world. I was on one side and the rest of the world was on the other side. I just didn't feel I was part of it at all, and that feeling went on for quite a long time, for quite a few months. I mean, my first initial reaction was just shock, and I just, I thought I was going to die. I mean, especially as in those days, they were still not really distinguishing what the difference between HIV and AIDS was.
I suppose it was raising people's awareness not only about AIDS, but all the difficult subjects that it highlights. For example, death, illness, feelings about sexuality and sexual relationships, major taboos that people often don't want to talk about. But it's only through talking about those things that people can grapple with AIDS itself.
This project was really very unusual in local radio terms.
It really was, because we were collaborating very closely with a local health authority, and also we were looking at an audience who in 40s, 50s, 60s probably felt they weren't directly affected by AIDS, but then nevertheless through a change in attitudes could make the atmosphere more comfortable for people living with HIV, the virus that can lead to AIDS.
We've also been recognised for our reflection of the diverse community that makes up the county, including a BBC Gillard Award for Diversity in 2002. Here's Joanne Good.
I can honestly say I've never felt more connected to a listener than when I was presenting The Breakfast Show in Brighton. And diversity 10 years ago wasn't what it is today. And I can remember we had a gay 5 minutes every single week, which resulted in us, BBC Southern Counties Radio, leading on our double-decker bus the whole of Brighton Pride through the streets. And as we entered Marine Parade, they said, "Thank you, Southern Counties Radio, for all you've done for the gay community of Brighton." I wept.
The one and only Joanne Good. These days to be heard on another of our sister stations, BBC London. Joanne is best remembered in this county as the presenter of a breakfast show that broadcast on our Brighton frequency, 95.3. And it's all part of the complicated history of radio in Sussex. Because in 1994, the then BBC Radio Sussex merged with BBC Radio Surrey to form a new service called BBC Southern Counties Radio. At first, it ran a single all-talk schedule across Sussex and Surrey. However, in September 1997, two dedicated breakfast shows, a county-wide programme presented by John Radford, and one just for Brighton and Hove with Joanne, were introduced. The merger of the two services and the move of the station HQ to Guildford, albeit with premises still in Brighton, was not without controversy. And as with so many things in life, we went full circle in 2009 with a formal reintroduction of the BBC Sussex name on air. Current managing editor Sarah David explains the thinking behind this decision.
As time went on, it became even more important for us to identify strongly with the local county. And actually, when we went out and spoke to people, they always used to refer to us as BBC Sussex anyway. And it just became the obvious thing. Why don't we just go back to having Sussex in our name? And as soon as we spoke to kind of local opinion formers, our listeners, everybody just said, we don't know why you just don't go ahead and do it. And so it became the obvious answer for us.
Managing editor of BBC Sussex, Sarah David. Sarah first came to the station in 1995, working as a researcher. Sarah's got fond memories of her time with the BBC, including the day she got a call to go to reception.
I've got so many really happy memories and lovely memories from the radio station. It's difficult to pick one. Things like the carol service every year, which is always such a lovely part of the year. But one thing that really sticks out in my mind is we were doing an appeal for a children's charity that helps the families of children across Sussex who have terminal or life-limiting illnesses. And I got a call to reception, and I wasn't really expecting anything major. I went into reception to find that a lady had left carrier bags full of change, and there were thousands and thousands and thousands of pounds in there for the appeal. And it was an elderly lady who had saved this money in her own house, and she didn't really know what to do with it. And she'd heard the appeal and was just moved by it and decided that that's what she wanted to happen to her money. And I mean, that was just fantastic in its own right, and she didn't want any publicity about it. She just very quietly gave the money. But then after a few days, once everything had been verified, I went to the charity to break the news to them, and I kind of sat them down and said, I've got something to tell you. And the looks on their faces when they realised just how much money this listener had given to their beloved charity, I'll never forget that.
One of the most momentous individual human stories in the history of BBC Radio Sussex came with this news bulletin.
The MP for Eastbourne, Ian Gow, has been killed in a bomb explosion at his home at Hankham in East Sussex. The bomb, which had been planted in Mr Gow's car, exploded shortly after 8:30 this morning. No group has so far claimed responsibility. Anna Hill reports from Hankham.
The scene of the explosion has been left as it was found. Metropolitan Police anti-terrorist squad officers are scouring the area around Mr Gow's house. They say the possibility of a second device couldn't be ruled out. Local people here say they heard the explosion across the village. The MP for Lewis, Tim Rathbone, has visited the scene, looking visibly shaken. Mr Gow's widow, Jane, has been with the local parish priest, who said that the Gows were determined not to live in a castle or to close themselves off. The Bishop of Lewis, Peter Ball, has said Mr Gow was outspoken and lived a brave life, and he knew the risk he was at of possible attack.
Anna Hill, now with BBC Radio 4, together with Sonia McLaughlin, looked back together at what actually happened in the wake of that bombing and the murder of Ian Gow.
That morning we received a telephone call from a person living near Eastbourne who called straight into the newsroom and told the news editor that they had heard an explosion down the road and mentioned that they lived near to the MP for Eastbourne, Ian Gow. And of course, that sent the alarm bells racing. And we decided immediately, of course, we should get someone down there straight away. And the first person to arrive on the scene was our reporter, Sonia McLaughlin.
That's right. I can't say it was a fluke, but that particular week I'd been penciled in to cover our district office in Eastbourne. And I was sent down to Hankham in a hurry, loaded up with my ewer, my mobile phone and various other bits and bobs that we needed. And when we got there, it was terrible scenes of chaos at that time because there were police cars, lights, flashing lights, people really not very sure at that time whether or not what we were all beginning to suspect had happened was actually true. And I remember as I got there, I was there for about half an hour before Anna arrived in the radio car.
By that time, quite a lot of other vehicles had arrived, and we phoned through straight away with our reports, which were for Radio 4 as well as for Radio Sussex. An impromptu press conference was held in the middle of a small green grass triangle in the middle of the road. Police lines were set up, and of course it was very important for us to have a certain number of people there. Sonia and I worked in tandem, so Sonia could go into the village and ask the people about their reaction.
You don't really think about it because you don't think it's going to happen to you or happen to someone just down the road, so it doesn't really sort of sink in. But it's just a bit nerve-wracking to know that they're 2 minutes away and they could have been doing it while working, and there could have been terrorists or whatever around here.
And I was left on the scene with the police officers to talk about the ins and outs of the attack itself.
Obviously, there is now an investigation into what will be a murder, and all these inquiries will be made door to door.
Locally, what are you doing?
House-to-house inquiries will be carried out as a matter of priority, but the first priority is to make sure that the scene is examined carefully, and given that this might be the use of an explosive device, obviously we cannot rule out the possibility of a secondary device.
It was extraordinary, the media circus that suddenly sprang up from nowhere. There were 70-foot cranes with television journalists, cameramen peering into the garden of Ian Gow via the cranes. There were massive techno vans turning up with all their satellite links. We were running on a little generator that was hand-started, rather like a mowing machine, and we were providing stuff for network people.
They actually set a field aside and roped it off, especially for the media, and there was catering, outside catering. It was almost like a film set with all the paraphernalia that was needed. I think the one thing that struck me more than anything was almost the responsibility that the local radio station had to the people of Hankham. I remember talking to a particular journalist from a very well-known tabloid who, as far as he was concerned, was quite happy to get the reaction from the local villagers in any way that he could, because after that he was going to be back in his car up the M23 back to London.